How do you make decisions when it comes to your interactions and relationships with others? Do you go with what's logically right for you? Or do you do what feels easiest? Or do you trust that subtle feeling that's in the background that's not always super easy to detect? In this video, I'm going to dive into how our thoughts and feelings are not always the best guide for how we should appropriately make decisions interpersonally, and also some very practical tips on how to connect with your intuition and to make the decisions that are best for you. If you're new to my videos, just letting you know that the structure of how I present is that I start with the psychology aspect of the topic we're addressing, and then in the latter part go into more of the metaphysical and spiritual perspective. And I thought it was very interesting even how I found my way to this topic, because the way that I select what to speak of or what to speak to in these videos is through a process of automatic writing that I start my day with when my analytical conscious mind hasn't kicked in too much, to get some intuitive guidance on what to speak to. And the topic of intuition came to me this morning, and I resisted it because I thought, well, that's not specifically related to relationships, which is the theme that I'm endeavoring to keep these videos centered around. But as I continue to write, I soon discovered that, well, of course, our intuition is hugely influential in our relationships, the decisions we make. And yeah, so here I am talking to this topic. And I guess some of the things that came up in my writing this morning were questions like the big ones. Do I start this relationship or this friendship with this person? Or do I end this relationship with this person? They're some big decisions that we grapple with from time to time, that we weigh up between our logic, our emotions, our intuition. But some other things that we need to decide upon on a day-to-day basis when it comes to our relationships are questions such as, do I go with what this other person wants me to do? Or do I stand my ground? Do I oppose them? Do I trust in what this other person is saying to me? And, what action will I take here in this situation, in knowing that it could affect other people? And I'm speaking to parents on that one, because as a parent, I know that some of the decisions, or many of the decisions that we make, are going to impact our children, and they're big decisions to make, and therefore feeling comfortable that we've made the right decision is important. So where I wanted to start was around the concept that our logic, our analytical mind, is the best place to lean into when it comes to making a decision. I think a lot of us are effectively programmed to believe that our logic is what is best trusted when it comes to making a decision. I think a lot of this goes to what we're told in our early life experiences, that once we get past a certain age, let's say 7, 8, 9, around that period, that tapping into your imagination or your imaginal world, your inner world, the world of images and fantasies, is not trustworthy, that we must be practical, must be logical, and let that logic guide us in our decision making. Now, our conscious mind is amazing for certain types of decision making. It's great with black and white problems. It's great with practical issues. So, for example, if my computer were to stop working today, my conscious mind, my analytical mind, is going to come up with a bunch of options. Either I do some, YouTubing to see if I can figure it out myself, find someone else who knows a bit about computers to fix it, take it to a shop, get a new one. There's only a certain number of options that really present from a from the point of view of a problem that's quite practical and deals with objects in the real world, such as my computer. But then when we go into the shades of grey, so problems around understanding why something happened in the past, trying to anticipate or predict what's going to happen in the future, understanding why I'm experiencing a particular emotion or someone else is experiencing a particular emotion, and relationships in general, which are very grey. There's no clear-cut black and white with what to do in every single situation with every person you encounter. And I'm talking the people you're close to or people that you encounter just casually. The conscious mind is not really designed, if you like, to do that kind of problem solving. It has a go at it, and I'm not saying it doesn't play any role whatsoever. Of course it does, but as far as its success rate being as good as, okay, what can I do to fix my computer, or what can I do to make sure I get some food in my body today or some water, the conscious mind is far less accurate and far less reliable when it comes to these grey problems. And we can't stop the conscious mind from doing that. Now, our minds will seek to solve problems. That is effectively the job of the conscious mind, is to solve problems. It sees it as its role to solve problems. So if there are problems, no matter what they are, the conscious mind will have a go, even if it's not coming up with great results or if it's creating distress, it'll still try. So we can't stop it, but we can step back from these thoughts, observe them, realize they are thoughts. They're not necessarily truths or facts or wisdom. And we can also do the deeper work. And that's a theme that comes up over and over in my videos, if you've seen any of the others, around the parts work, around the fact that we have these parts of ourselves that are driving these thought patterns, parts that are trying to help, trying to keep us safe, protect us, and that these parts will potentially overdo what they're attempting to do to protect us, and not necessarily always do us favours. And so doing the parts work, the shadow work, really helps clear the way for trusting different aspects of ourselves to make decisions, and we'll come to intuition shortly. The same goes for our emotions. So our emotions aren't completely reliable either. And again, this links back to what I was referencing a moment ago with our parts, that we have parts that will create an anxious response or a guilty response, and do so because there is some kind of fear that if we take some kind of course of action, make some kind of decision, that there will be some undue outcome. And so this is where it gets quite tricky, because, for example, people talk about trusting your gut, trusting your instincts, and having a certain feeling that's quite uncomfortable. And what is that feeling? Is that feeling your intuition, or is that feeling your anxiety, your fear, your hesitation that's driven by something that isn't actually your intuition? So again, it highlights the importance of turning inwards, of getting to know that there are different aspects of yourself that are running an agenda to try to protect you, that were programmed into you because at some points in your life you felt you needed to be protected. And so these parts, when they're acknowledged, when an alliance is formed with them, and they are brought into more of a state of harmony, don't necessarily have to throw up these signals, these sensations, these emotions that can get us to hesitate and not take the course of action that we're supposed to take. I can speak to this personally. It was a very challenging decision-making process that I went through in deciding whether or not to remain in my marriage. And there was a lot of hesitation, even though I was getting these signals, these signs to say it's time to walk away, it's time to step away. Many, many signs. Again, I'll come to intuition in a moment, but when I found this part of me that was, with the guidance of a colleague of mine who helped me find this part, that was holding on to this fear of being a bad father, which mapped on to my own father leaving and starting a new family when I was younger, and brought integration and healing to this part. I was liberated, and that those emotions no longer held me back, and I was free to lean into and trust my intuition. So, what is intuition? Now, I can't answer this from a psychology point of view. I simply have to lean into my metaphysical and spiritual learnings over the last 20 or so years to explain that. I don't think psychology really has a good explanation for what intuition is. My personal belief, from all I've come to experience and learn over the years, is that our intuition is our higher self speaking to us through the subconscious and unconscious minds and through signs and synchronicities. In fact, the signs and synchronicities for me were the starting point of my spiritual journey, that I had these events unfold that just I couldn't dismiss as being coincidences, and that just spurred me to open myself up to more and more of these so-called coincidences until I just knew that they weren't coincidences, that there is an intelligence, that there are wisdoms at play beyond the physical, always attempting to guide us, even though we don't often know exactly why or where these nudges are leading us. Our higher self knows. I think it's fascinating that over 80%, a study recently found that over 80% of adults have had an experience of either thinking about someone and then them calling them, or texting them or seeing them just shortly afterwards. 80%, that's a large number. And so this has been taken as evidence that intuitively we know we're tapped into something beyond the physical that, when we pay attention, can guide us and give us clues about what's coming up or what action to take. On the flip side, a lot of us have probably had that experience of having a feeling about someone and ignoring it. Relationships would be a classic example of this, where we had these red flags, these alarm bells going off early on in a relationship or a friendship, and yet we ignored it. Possibly because some other parts of us craved connection or had some other kind of an agenda to keep this connection going. But our intuition was telling us all along, and it's only with the benefit of hindsight that we can sometimes see that, okay, there was the intuition telling me what to do, guiding me, but I didn't pay attention. And everyone's different with how they'll be guided. It can be thoughts, it can be images popping in, it can be these so-called coincidences, which I don't call coincidences, are clearly synchronicity, things synchronized happening in patterns for reasons, subtle feelings and nudges, or even hesitations to take action or strong desires to take action without any specific reason. I've had numerous clients over the years say to me they just had this feeling that they needed to go somewhere, and on a few occasions it was to find someone right before they're about to take their own life, or that they felt drawn to go to a particular location and then bumped into someone that they were meant to have a conversation with, and that led to a very meaningful relationship. I've encountered it so many times, and in my own personal life as well, that I don't get surprised by it anymore. It's just part of how I seek to live my life, is to pay attention to these synchronistic events or these flashes that come to me, these knowings that come to me, and lean into them. And the good news is that if we miss an an intuition, a guidance, a few times, generally our higher self will keep sending through more signs, more signals. It's not that we have to catch it the first time, and if we miss it, that's it. There's generally multiple chances, and that building up of multiple occurrences tends to help us to trust in, okay, I can see what's going on here. I'm definitely being guided to this course of action. But on the other hand, if we ignore them persistently and consistently, the higher self will stop sending through those signals. We'll stop sending the messages through, because if we're not paying attention, then why bother sending more through until we've heeded the messages that have already been sent? So I'd like to give everyone a few tips on how to tap into your intuition and to use that intuition to enhance your relationships and your decision making with others in your life. First one is to pay attention if a thought comes in that seems to come out of nowhere. I've had this on numerous occasions myself, where, for example, a client will pop into my head, haven't seen them for a couple of years, and they will call the next day to rebook. I had no idea why they popped into my head. I wasn't deliberately thinking of them. I wasn't going through a process of rehashing the past. Literally, they just presented. So that type of thought that just pops in there out of nowhere doesn't seem to find a logical string. Whereas if I had have gone, okay, what was I doing 5 years ago, and started going through a process, 2 years ago, and thinking about what I'd been doing and people I'd seen, and then that particular client popped into my head. Not necessarily an intuitive thought, just a reflective type of a thought. So that's one way that you can maybe have a sense that you're getting an intuitive thought come to you, when it just pops in out of nowhere. It doesn't have to be an image. It can be a metaphor. It can be words. It could present in a range of different ways. But if it comes out of nowhere, I'd say pay attention. The other I've already touched on. If signs or synchronicities seem to keep repeating, then again, it's likely to be intuition. My partner recently had this happen to her, where she just kept getting all these indications of Bali. She never thought about going to Bali before. She had no reason to go to Bali. But in the process of making a documentary, she's seeking to find a retreat and was going to run it here in Australia. But the more these Bali signs started coming in, until eventually it led to an opportunity to go there and to raise some funds for a documentary, and she took action. And it was really quite surprising how it just came out of nowhere, and the signs just kept coming thick and fast until eventually she took action. I guess the third tip is to learn to know the difference between a reactive emotion and a gut feeling. So this links back to what I was talking to before. If you're considering starting a relationship, for example, and you have this feeling that's making you quite uneasy, it could be that there's a protective aspect of yourself pushing you away from the relationship, trying to tell you not to go into it because you got hurt last time around, or multiple times you've been hurt. So this again highlights the importance of doing this inner investigation, getting to know what parts of you might be there that are protective because you've been hurt, doing that inner work. I constantly refer to the internal family systems model on my videos because I think that's one of the best, or the best way I've come across to do this inner work. And then after you've done the inner investigation work with these parts, you're more able to tell the difference between, okay, that was anxiety rather than intuition. And I'd also say that an intuitive feeling tends to be more subtle than smack bang in your face. But I don't want to say that as a blanket rule, because if there's some urgent scenario about to unfold and that you maybe ignored that intuitive feeling, then it could become quite intense to the point of creating quite strong sensations. Another tip is to breathe into your heart or bring your attention to your soul star chakra, which is about 15 to 30 centimeters above your head. So firstly, just bringing your awareness into your heart and breathing into your heart just takes the focus from being in your head, brings the consciousness down more into a heart space rather than a head space. And alternatively, pulling the attention or your awareness above your head connects you with your soul star chakra, which is where your higher self channels through the guidance, through the information. One of the ways the higher self comes through that chakra, through the crown. So for me, when I breathe in the mornings before doing my automatic writing, I actually do a combination of both. Breathe into the heart and then feel the awareness extending up through to the soul star chakra, and keep that happening for a number of breaths until I just really feel that everything's gone quite, I guess, blank, and I'm just present, and then commence my writing. Another point to highlight here, or another tip here, is to not force your intuition. You can't force an intuitive answer, and this is where surrender really comes into play. Putting a question out to your higher self, the universe, however you want to think of it, and patiently waiting for those answers to come back. Anytime there's some level of force, that has to be coming from your mind. It's not coming from your intuition. If you're trying to force an answer or analyze an answer, that's not your intuition. And finally, I'd like to touch on a process that I learned, and I would highly recommend anyone chasing down this particular individual, William Whitecloud. He has written a couple of books. Create Your Destiny, I think, is one of them. Sorry, I should have got the titles. And he runs some online trainings, and he taught me a very impressive method that worked very well for when I was making some very big decisions in the past, and I still use this method now. And it starts with going into a state of innocence. So into this state, which he uses a particular meditation to guide people into, a state of childlike innocence, where basically all the beliefs, the programming, we're just taking ourselves into this sense of being who we were before all that happened, as like a child, and bringing that childlike innocence to the present moment, to how we experience what's right in front of us. So that's step one, to go into this state of innocence. Secondly, it is to observe the obvious. So this is the process that I went through in using this method when I was trying to decide what to do with my marriage, and I'd go into a state of innocence. Then for me, I found it best to open my eyes afterwards to see what signs or what the obvious was around me, and in one of them it was that I was looking at these two cushions on the lounge in front of me, and what the guidance is to focus on what draws your attention the most. And as I looked at these two cushions, one of them was sitting up straight with the pattern facing with one particular pattern, and the other cushion had the opposite pattern because it was reversed and was really crumpled over. And the third part of the guidance is to make it up. So to go with verbalizing what it is that I'm getting from this thing, this experience in front of me that's drawing my attention, which was these two cushions on this occasion. And as I started to speaking it out, it was about the fact that the two cushions weren't matching, they weren't aligned, one was clearly different to the other, and that was a clear sign to me about not matching with my ex-wife, and that it was time to go. There are others that I did to confirm that, because again, the conscious mind really struggles sometimes to trust in those experiences. So I did others that led me to the same conclusions. So that process is really amazing, and I that's a summary. Obviously, if you were to train in the process that William Whitecloud teaches, you might find that your intuition really goes to that next level. When we live guided by our intuition, our lives just flow more in the direction that they're supposed to. Now, that doesn't mean everything is positive, because sometimes what we're being guided to do is to face something we've been avoiding, or to take on a challenge that's going to evolve us. So I'm certainly not suggesting that your intuition is always going to lead to positive outcomes, but it's leading you in the direction that your higher self, that your soul seeks to take you. And in the long term, it'll always align us with our higher self, and this will lead us to our authentic version of ourselves. An individual who embodies love, who acts with love, and who is love.